Something that we see quite a bit in Texas and probably other states as well is a question comes up quite a bit when people are looking at state level housing policy or any policy. And that is, why go at it the state level? You hear things like local control is important. I'm interested to hear your take of why should Texas go the route of state level reforms as opposed to maybe municipality by municipality?
That's a really good question. People start from different places here. I would say I'm a local first, state next, federal never.
Yeah.
Is kind of where I'd stand. I mean, there are federal policies that the federal government already does, and they should optimize those, but they shouldn't be involved in zoning. Legally, the state controls the police power, which it delegates to the localities, and that's where the power to zone comes from. And I think states have some responsibility in that they enormously encouraged zoning in the mid 20th century. So the state, and actually the federal government as well, said, hey, we want you to do zoning. You should all be planning things top down. Central planning is the rational way to run an economy. It turned out that was completely wrong. And all the economists who said the Soviet Union was going to overtake the US were wrong, because central planning is less efficient, not more efficient than a private market. So this kind of everything should be planned mentality, that gave us zoning. Zoning today doesn't honestly have much to do with its parentage, but that's where it came from. And, I do think the best and most interesting zoning policies and reforms, they do come local, right? So if you look at what Houston has done to allow the sort of detached townhomes in its central neighborhoods, that's been phenomenally interesting. It has also removed parking restrictions throughout the core of Houston, and getting ahead. The state is never going to lead. The state kind of follows.
Sure.
But you can look at examples like Houston and say, okay, this is working in Houston, and it's not honestly going to get transmitted to other cities very quickly. It would take generations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think there's a role for the state to say, hey, we've seen what best practices are, and we are going to institute, especially in this area, a bias towards respecting property rights, right? So unless there's a compelling reason for a locality to make something illegal, there are some basic things that should just be legal, right? So should I be allowed, if I'm a good citizen who's not creating a nuisance on my property, should I be allowed to build a house to live in on my property, even if the property is pretty small? Right? To me, as a property rights thing, that's just wow, what is the deal? What's the thing that an extra 1,000 square feet of yard space was going to make me a better citizen? That's really different than being allowed to run a large business that has several thousand cars a day coming in and out, where that impacts my neighbors by creating a ton of traffic. But I have one house on one lot. I come and go a couple times a day, right? That there's just not an impact on my neighbors there in any sort of safety or quality of life way. Sure. And so I think of these kinds of legislation as playing defense a little bit. There's maybe a universal tendency in local zoning to get stricter over time, right? So places usually start with pretty permissive zoning and say, hey, we're a small town, build whatever you want. And then as they get bigger, as they have more congestion, they start to say, well, we don't like this, we don't like that. And they make it, harder to build this, harder to build that, little by little. As that adds up, there needs to be some kind of pushback. Otherwise, you kind of ratchet into the situation where the coastal states are in, where we can't legally build the kinds of neighborhoods that we live in. Literally, the homes that we live in are no longer buildable. If you somehow found 5 acres of land, you wouldn't be allowed to build what your great grandfather could build. So, I think the state legislature, it has a role in transmitting the innovations that you get at the local level, and protecting property rights. Right? Ultimately, the most local level is you.